Story 1. The hallway that repeated itself. I started noticing the hallway the first night I moved in, though at the time, I didn't realize it was watching me back. Every night it seemed, just slightly off. I live in a small, rundown apartment in New Jersey with my roommate Dan. The building itself is the kind that smells faintly of mildew and fried food no matter the season. The hallway outside our unit is narrow, poorly lit by a flickering fluorescent light, and lined with faded beige wallpaper that peels at the corners. Nothing unusual there, or so I thought. It began with small things. I'd leave our apartment to grab mail or step out for a smoke, and I'd catch myself thinking I'd already done the same exact thing that evening. The exact position of the mailboxes, the way the light hit the peeling wallpaper, even the creak of the stairwell. I felt like I had memorized it all before, down to the tiniest detail. I chalked it up to moving stress and the monotony of apartment life. But then the déjà vu started repeating itself in sequences, not just fleeting flashes. I'd open the door, walk down the hallway, and hear the same distant thump from a neighboring apartment. The same muffled music leaking through the thin walls. The hallway's flicker of light would stutter in the exact same rhythm. Sometimes I would pause at the same spot to check my phone, only to feel a strange chill run up my spine, as if the air itself was aware of my hesitation. At first, I tried to ignore it. It didn't matter that the sensation was creeping from the edges of my awareness into full-blown certainty. Every night, the apartment felt smaller, the hallway longer, the shadows heavier. And then came the day I realized it wasn't just me. Dan mentioned it first. "Did you hear that?" he asked one evening, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor with his laptop. I don't know. I swear I just saw someone at the end of the hall. Like standing there, watching, I laughed nervously. "You're imagining things. This building's old. The shadows just..." He shook his head. "No, I'm serious." And it wasn't just a glimpse. It felt like déjà vu, like I'd seen it happen before. I froze. That word, déjà vu, had been my companion every night for the past week. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, the sudden awareness that my private fears weren't confined to my mind alone. The repetition escalated. I began to notice that the hallway was performing itself like a recording. I'd leave the apartment, feel the uneven rug under my feet, hear the same squeak in the stairwell, and notice the same 3 dead spots in the peeling wallpaper. I tried to break the cycle by taking different routes, leaving at different times, carrying groceries, even skipping meals, but the hallway wouldn't change. It waited, it repeated. One night around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound I couldn't place. A soft, methodical tapping, like fingernails against metal, echoing from somewhere in the building. I went to Dan's room, thinking he might be awake, only to find him trembling, eyes wide in the dark. "I dreamed it again," he whispered. The same man, walking down the hallway. I asked him to describe it, but he couldn't. He only said it was tall, slow, featureless somehow, and that he felt watched even while asleep. That night, we both lay in silence, listening to the occasional groan of the old building, wondering if sleep itself had betrayed us. After that, the hallucinations, or dreams, I wasn't sure which, became synchronized. We'd see the same hallway in our dreams, the same flickering light, the same peeling wallpaper. We began leaving the door slightly ajar before bed, half hoping we'd wake to find the man standing there, half terrified we'd be right. It was one Tuesday night, a week after Dan confessed his dreams, that it got worse. I was returning from the bathroom barefoot and half asleep when I froze mid-step. The hallway looked wrong. Not physically, but in that gut-twisting way that makes you question reality. The shadows stretched longer than they should have. The light flickered in a rhythm that felt deliberate, almost like it was pulsing to some secret beat. And then I heard it, a slow, dragging footstep, precise and deliberate, echoing toward us from the far end of the hall. My heart froze, sweat prickling my scalp. I tried to call Dan's name, but my throat went dry. The step paused just out of sight, and for a moment, I convinced myself I had imagined it. Dan appeared beside me in the doorway, his face pale. He whispered, "It's him. He's real. He's been walking our hallway for, I don't know, forever." We didn't sleep that night. Instead, we sat in the living room, lights on, listening to the quiet thrum of the building. Every time the flickering light shifted, we flinched. Every distant creak of floorboards sounded like someone pacing just out of reach. By the following week, the hallway became a character in itself. We could predict its movements, yet that only made it worse. The rhythm of events, the way the light stuttered, the soft whine of the old radiator, the faint smell of mildew thickening near the stairwell, was like an invisible hand guiding us through a script we hadn't written. We started leaving notes, reminders, questions, warnings, trying to assert some control over what we'd seen and felt. But each morning, the notes were in the same exact positions we left them, unchanged. The hallway mocked us with its precision, as if time itself were looping, and we were stuck in its unyielding pattern. Then last night it happened. We were both awake, both watching, when the hallway finally showed its face. Not in dreams, not imagined, real. The same tall, featureless figure moved with deliberate pace toward our door. The light flickered in that familiar off-kilter rhythm. My pulse pounded so hard I thought Dan might hear it. We didn't move. We didn't breathe too loudly. And then it stopped, just at the threshold of our apartment. The air grew colder, denser, heavier. The shadows stretched into corners that shouldn't exist. We fell asleep anyway, unable to stay awake forever, and woke this morning to find nothing changed. The hallway, perfectly identical to how it had been night after night, awaited us outside our door. We've talked about moving, but every time I think about leaving, I get the same prickling sensation at the back of my neck. The feeling that whatever is out there in that hallway would follow us, would repeat itself no matter where we go. I don't know how long this will continue, or if it ever ends. But last night, as I walked past the mailboxes, I could have sworn I saw the faint outline of someone standing at the far end of the hall, watching, waiting for the next loop to begin. And now I can't help but wonder, maybe it's not déjà vu. Maybe it's the hallway that remembers us. Story 2. The Abandoned House in the Woods. I still remember the moment I realized something in the woods was watching us, and it wasn't human. It started as a normal Saturday morning hike with my younger brother Ethan. The forest behind our small town had always been our refuge. Tall oaks, pine needles underfoot, and the quiet hum of birds. But that day something felt off. The air was heavier than usual, the sun struggling through thick clouds, and a faint chill ran along my spine, even though it wasn't cold. We'd been following a trail I'd never noticed before, one that wound deeper into the forest than we usually dared. Ethan, ever curious, kept urging me to keep going, but I hesitated. That's when I saw it. A house, half hidden behind twisted trees, its darkened windows staring like empty eye sockets. "I've seen this place before," I told him, my voice barely above a whisper. I know what's inside," Ethan laughed nervously. "You mean in a dream or something?" I shook my head. "No dream, not exactly." My stomach tightened as memories, or visions, pushed forward in my mind. The peeling wallpaper, the creaking stairs, and a woman in a faded dress standing at the top of the staircase. I hadn't seen it yet, but I could see it. "It's upstairs," I murmured. "A woman, she's looking at us." Ethan gave me a skeptical look, but the way the wind stirred the branches above us seemed almost conspiratorial, and I felt a sudden compulsion to move closer. The house smelled of damp wood and something older, almost like decay and dust mixed together. The front door was slightly ajar, moving with a slow, deliberate creak that echoed into the still forest. "Maybe we shouldn't," Ethan started, but I cut him off, almost without thinking. "I have to see her," I said. And then we stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under our weight, and the dim light from the cloudy sky barely lit the hallway. Everything was coated in a thin layer of dust, as if the house had been waiting for someone, or something, to return. My heart pounded, and I felt a strange combination of fear and certainty. I knew what we would find, even before we saw it. The staircase was just as I had imagined. The wood felt brittle under my hand as I placed it on the banister, and I could see faint shadows dancing across the walls from the occasional flicker of sunlight through broken blinds. "She's up there," I whispered, more to myself than to Ethan. We climbed slowly, step by step. Every sound, the wind rattling the window frames, a distant bird call, the shifting of our shoes against the floor, amplified in the suffocating silence. And then we saw her. At the top of the stairs, standing in the doorway of a small room, was a woman. Her hair was long, stringy and dark, falling over her pale face. She wore a dress that looked decades old, and she didn't move or speak, but the way she watched us made it feel like she was inside our heads. My stomach dropped and Ethan froze, his eyes wide. She's real, he breathed. I wanted to tell him to back away, to run, but I couldn't. Something about her held me in place. My visions, or memories, pushed forward, showing me the next moments, the slight tilt of her head, the way her lips would move as if whispering words just out of hearing, and the cold draft that would sweep through the hallway, brushing against my neck like icy fingers. Then she moved, not quickly, not with malice, but in a way that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. She glided across the floor, coming closer to us, and the air seemed to thicken, heavy with an oppressive quiet. Ethan grabbed my arm, trembling. "We need to leave," he said, voice tight. I nodded, though my legs felt like they were weighed down by some unseen force. As we backed down the stairs, she didn't follow, but I could feel her presence pressing into my mind, watching our every step. The house seemed to breathe with us, the walls pulsing faintly in the dim light, every shadow stretching just a little too far. Outside, the forest didn't feel like home anymore. The birds were silent, the breeze stilled, and the clouds overhead had thickened, blotting out the sun entirely. We ran without speaking, leaves snapping underfoot, our breaths ragged and shallow. Later, back in my bedroom, I replayed everything in my head. The woman's face, the certainty that I had seen her before she appeared, the way the house seemed alive in its silence. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of memory, of imagination. But then I realized something that made my blood run cold. I could recall details I hadn't consciously noticed. The cracked picture frame in the hallway, the faint scent of lavender on the staircase, the small scratch on the floorboards, all things that were exactly as I had envisioned them before we stepped inside. And that's when I understood. I hadn't just seen the house before. I had been inside it. Somehow, some part of me had walked these halls long before that Saturday. Ethan doesn't want to go back there. Neither do I. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see her again, watching from the top of the stairs, tilting her head slightly, waiting. And I can't shake the feeling that she isn't just confined to that house, that she remembers us, and that one day we might walk back into the woods and the house will be ready for us. Because I know what's coming next. I can see it already, and she's still waiting. Story 3, the crash that already happened. I remember the exact second I realized I shouldn't have been on that road at all. The memory hit me like a whisper of glass sliding across metal, and it wasn't mine. It was late October, a week after sunset, and I was driving my old Corolla down the winding country road that cut through the outskirts of my hometown. The trees on either side pressed in like dark sentinels, their branches scratching against the car roof when the wind gusted. The air was sharp, the kind that makes your lungs sting, and I had the windows cracked just enough to hear the faint rustle of leaves. I hadn't planned on taking this route. It wasn't a shortcut, and it wasn't necessary. But something, some gnawing curiosity or laziness, had nudged me down this familiar stretch anyway. As I rounded the first sharp bend, I froze mid-steer. There it was, the crash, or rather the vision of it. In my mind's eye, I saw the hood of a car crumple, tires skidding over asphalt, the faint glint of headlights against the curve of the guardrail. A metallic smell, like burning oil, invaded my nose even though the air in my car was crisp and clean. I jerked the wheel instinctively to the right, heart hammering, and the next moment, I was past it. Nothing had happened. The road was empty. No smoke, no twisted metal, no screams, just the echoing crunch of leaves under my tires. I pulled over a half-mile later, shaking, and tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd seen a similar accident on the news, a flashback mixing with my imagination. Maybe I was just tired, but it wasn't just a feeling of déjà vu, it was a full memory, like I'd lived it. I could see the car, hear the sound, smell the acrid tang of burnt rubber. Every detail was there, perfectly etched in my mind. I swore with everything in me that I had already witnessed this exact crash. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I avoided that road at night, took different routes, and kept replaying the incident in my head. My friends laughed it off when I described it, but their laughter didn't reach me. Something in my chest tightened whenever I thought about it, a cold dread that refused to leave. Then the news came. I was scrolling through headlines one gray Thursday morning when I saw it. Driver killed in single-car accident on County Road. The photograph made my stomach twist. A Corolla, identical to mine, smashed against the guardrail, the front end crumpled exactly like the memory I'd seen. Emergency lights reflected off the mangled metal in a way that was almost familiar. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I scrolled through the article. Witnesses reported a lone driver, no passengers, and no explanation for why the car had gone off the road. The time matched, the night I had driven that same route. My hands were clammy as I realized the terrifying truth. The crash had already happened. But it hadn't happened to me. It had happened to someone else. I drove past the scene the next day, hesitant, heart thudding so hard it felt like it might burst through my ribs. The Corolla was gone, the guardrail dented but repaired, and the asphalt bore no sign of the chaos I had seen. Still, the air carried that same metallic tang, faint but undeniable, curling in the back of my throat. Every instinct screamed at me, warning me that I had narrowly avoided not just an accident, but something far more sinister. The strangest part was how exact it all felt. The details, the timing, the angle of the turn. I began to notice it everywhere. A bent branch on the side of the road that matched the one in my vision. The faint scar of skid marks that hadn't been there before. The smell that lingered in the air like a warning. It was as if reality had conspired to replay the crash for me, to show me that memory first so I could, avoid it? But why had someone else's life been required for me to do so? Sleep became impossible. At night I would wake drenched in sweat, heart hammering, replaying the curve, the squeal of tires, the sudden jolt I hadn't felt but remembered perfectly. Every car on the road, every curve I passed, every shadow in my headlights made me flinch. I started to see glimpses of it in broad daylight, too. A flash of crumpled metal in a magazine, a video of a minor fender bender, and my mind would lunge forward, as if pulling from that memory. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence, that my brain had stitched together fragments from news, imagination, and fear. But deep down I knew better. I had seen something I shouldn't have seen, a future that had already been written and then transferred to someone else. It was a crash that had been waiting, patient, inevitable, and now it had happened without me, leaving me alive only because I had been granted a second chance I couldn't explain. And yet, I can't shake the sense that it's not over. Every time I see a car on that road, a shadow in the headlights, I feel that cold tug in my chest, that whisper of rubber on asphalt. I still know with a certainty that terrifies me that if I ever take that route again, I might not be so lucky. The memory isn't mine to keep, it's a warning, and warnings, I've learned, have a way of becoming reality if you ignore them. I don't drive that road anymore, but sometimes, late at night, I dream I'm behind the wheel, rounding that curve, hearing the crunch, smelling the metal. And in that dream I can't move, can't turn the wheel, can't stop it. And when I wake, my hands are shaking, my chest tight, and I know, somewhere, in another version of this world, the crash is still waiting for me. I can't forget it. I can't undo it. I can only hope that somehow knowing it exists is enough to keep it from coming for me next. But a part of me knows it's not. Story 4. The Loops of Miss Adelaide. I remember the exact moment I realized something in the care home wasn't quite right. It wasn't loud, and it didn't make sense at first. It was just a quiet, mechanical repetition, like a clock skipping a second. I worked at the Rosewood Manor, a modest care home tucked between brownstones and Queens. It wasn't a bad place. Friendly staff, clean rooms, the usual shuffling of elderly residents. But there was one resident who made the entire floor feel off. Miss Adelaide. She was in her late 80s, frail, with a shock of white hair that framed a face etched with lines so deep you felt they held secrets. She spent most of her days in a wheelchair by the big window in the common lounge, staring out at the street as if expecting something, or someone. She rarely spoke, but when she did, it was almost always the same phrase. "Don't let the time slip," she'd whisper, her voice fragile but oddly urgent. At first, we chalked it up to dementia, or maybe the peculiarities of age. But it wasn't just her words. It was how she said them. They weren't random. There was a rhythm, a cadence, and after a while, I noticed that she could predict things with unnerving precision. One afternoon, I was pushing a cart with afternoon tea down the corridor when Miss Adelaide's voice stopped me mid-step. 3 minutes. 3 minutes until he comes. I glanced at the clock. 3 minutes later, Mr. Benson, a visiting family member, entered the lounge exactly on schedule. I shrugged it off as coincidence, but it kept happening. Lights flickering, doors creaking, the phone ringing. She always knew. Sometimes she even repeated conversations before they happened. Then there were the loops. She'd murmur a phrase, pause, and then repeat it word for word, as if she had said it yesterday or tomorrow. You'll see it again. Don't move your lips. You'll see it again. I didn't understand what she meant, and no one did. Some staff whispered about her being in her own time, and for weeks, I tried to avoid thinking about it. But one evening, during the late shift, I stayed behind to help with medication. That's when I first noticed it. Small things, tiny repetitions, subtle echoes in the hallways. The same nurse passing the same spot twice in under a minute, the echo of a chair scraping against the floor when no one was there. Miss Adelaide's loops weren't just words, they were patterns in reality. The day she passed was quiet, almost too quiet. She was asleep in her chair by the window, and I watched her chest rise and fall one last time. When she didn't wake for her afternoon tea, we called the nurse. There was nothing spectacular about her death, just the inevitable slow slipping of life that comes with age. But that night, after the cleaning crew had gone, I stayed behind again. The lounge felt colder than usual, the shadows longer, and then I heard it, the phrase, the exact words she had repeated so many times, "Don't let the time slip." I froze. The room was empty. My own breathing felt loud, intrusive. The clock ticked normally, but somewhere in the corner, it felt like the second hand hesitated, then skipped. And then I realized I was hearing it again, exactly as she had said it. Only this time, it wasn't her. Over the next week, other staff began to notice things. The kitchen staff said the coffee machine would turn on by itself at odd intervals. Nurses reported hearing footsteps pacing the halls at 3:17 a.m., exactly 3 times each night. One orderly swore he saw a shadow of an old woman in the hallway mirror, rocking slightly in a chair that wasn't there, and almost every time they heard the words, whispered, faint but clear. 3 minutes. You'll see it again. I tried to tell myself it was grief, collective imagination, the stress of working nights. But it didn't feel like imagination. It felt patient, deliberate. It felt like someone was trying to teach us the loops, the repetition, the timing of things that weren't meant to be noticed. Then one night I was alone on the floor finishing paperwork. The hall lights flickered. A cold draft snaked around my ankles, carrying that soft whisper. Don't move your lips. You'll see it again. I turned sharply, expecting a draft from a broken window, but the corridor was empty. My own reflection in the glass door looked stretched, slightly off. The words repeated again, almost synchronized with my heartbeat, and for a moment, I could swear the hall was looping. Each step I took felt like I had already taken it. I fled to the nurse's station, and when I looked back, the lounge window reflected a woman in white, sitting in a chair that didn't exist, rocking gently, repeating her words endlessly. I blinked and she was gone. The next day, staff decided to rearrange the lounge, to break the pattern. Nothing worked. The loops continued. Visitors reported strange déjà vu. Residents started repeating phrases they'd never said before. And Miss Adelaide's voice? It was still there, threaded through the air, through the walls, impossible to escape. No one knows exactly what she was or why the loops continued. Some say she saw time differently, that she had glimpsed a cycle we weren't meant to notice. Others say she never left, that she's still in the hallways, waiting for someone to realize the rhythm, the repetition, the inevitable return. I quit a few weeks later. I couldn't handle the ticking, the whispers, the endless sense that something was replaying around me, just out of sync. But I can't forget it. I still hear it sometimes, when the wind brushes the window, or a floorboard creaks too perfectly. Don't let the time slip. You'll see it again, and I know I will.